Good day to you all. Today I bring you a tale of deception, utter repulsion, and neckbeardiness. So put on your fedora and let's dive into the twisted world of CopyBeard. Now, I may not be the protagonist of these horrific tales. I am merely the author, though I might pop in depending on the story. But let's first establish a cast of characters. Sombra, my cousin, the protagonist, and also the unfortunate soul who fell victim to CopyBeard's web. She is an animation student at the moment, huge fan of Coco and Overwatch, cannot stand lace, loves pandas, and hates CopyBeard with a passion. CopyBeard, the neckbeard in question. While he may not bear the infamous neckbeard or any other typical characteristics associated with them like a fedora and trench coat, he was immensely overweight. Unsanitary to a point where he has evolved a walking quarantine zone. A smug and entitled aura that was just as pungent as his odor, and overall a giant man-child born with a golden shovel shoved up his rectum because a silver spoon is not enough. The other mother, CopyBeard's mom, the beldam disguised as a caring, doting woman. She was the one who initially enticed Sombra into her family's web, and she spoils CopyBeard rotten, and I really mean it. She would bend over backwards for her Jabba the Fat's son. Palethorn, a basement dweller of the truest sense of the word, likely wears it proudly on a scraggly rat's nest of a mane. He is CopyBeard's dad, and he has a huge thorn on Sombra's side. Aggressive, repulsive, misogynistic, and just an overall stain of the earth. So, with that in mind, let's begin. Sombra first met CopyBeard during her freshman year of high school around Halloween. She had been asked to chaperone a friend of hers to a party being held at CopyBeard's Fortress of Fatitude. At the time, she was having a rough year, so she arrived at the party dressed as a clique girl. Though, really, she just slapped on her first day of school attire and called it a costume. Meanwhile, her friend went as the Queen of Hearts. They arrived at the party, and there is already a couple of guests in attendance, and while her friend was mingling with the guests, Sombra met the other mother, who then introduced her to CopyBeard later that same night, and they hit it off. The trap was set, and they began to hang out more often, ultimately leading to an inseparable friendship with her son, CopyBeard. And what Sombra thought was a meaningful friendship that would last a lifetime slowly descended into her worst nightmare. CopyBeard's parents drew her in with gadgets and toys that her own family could not afford, while slowly beginning to reveal their true colors. As much as she wanted to get out of there, she could not help but be overwhelmed with guilt as they already showered her with gifts. Not to mention they knew which buttons to push. The other mother, Palethorn, and CopyBeard took advantage of Sombra's passive behavior, her inability to say no, and being emotionally tied down to the materialistic things they brought her. As for CopyBeard himself, even with his description alone, he was the creme de la creme of Sombra's problems. For starters, he does not drive. Keep in mind, he and his family are not poor in the slightest, frivolous, yes, but by no means financially struggling. At the time of writing this, CopyBeard in his 20s, and he refused to get a license or even renew his driver's permit, as he is convinced his parents, specifically his mom, will drive him anywhere. So, in short, he's pretty lazy. CopyBeard's only excuse as to why he refuses to drive is, "I might get into a car crash." Well, you cannot really learn if you never tried. And driving is something that takes getting used to, and yet he cannot seem to get it through his skull. Now, I bet you're wondering why I do call him CopyBeard. To put it simply, he's made it his mission to copy Sombra at every aspect, this including, but not limited to, her interests and hobbies. Whatever she liked, it was now what he liked. Now, if he really wanted to copy her, he could try to mimic her body type and shed that blubber coat. But I digress. It first started with her love of pandas, which she loved since she was little. One year, she came down to my place to spend summer, and during that time, I introduced her to Hetalia, and she wound up falling head over heels for one of the characters, China. who in the official art was typically seen carrying a panda on his back. After that point, pandas become her ultimate favorite, and unfortunately one of the first things CopyBeard would take from her. It did not take long for him to catch on to her interest in pandas and latch on like a leech. It first started off small, like him learning, "I love pandas!" until eventually accumulated into getting a tattoo of Pangoro, a Pokemon that greatly resembled a panda, on his leg. That was a huge insult to Sombra, and to this day serves as a reminder that CopyBeard will always find ways to make a mockery of her. But with that in mind, I'm going to have to end it here. Next time, we cover CopyBeard's unsanitary and dietary habits, plus an incident involving a container of cheese balls. Chapter 2. New character, Octavia. Sombra's roommate at the time of the story, fortunately not as familiar with CopyBeard, but just as disgusted by his behavior. Now, let's begin. It was during Sombra's final year of obtaining her associate's degree, and at that time she was working at Arby's. Now, she initially saved up money for school and all their essentials, but then came the other mother, who came crying to her about a tattoo she was going to get. The tattoo was to commemorate the memory of her stepmother, and after yanking on Sombra's heartstrings, somehow convinced her to pay for her tattoo plus her own. This left her bank account slimmer than a wafer, and with insufficient funds, she could not buy a lot of groceries, thus rations had to be established until her next paycheck. Not to mention she had to be careful with the food she already had. This sadly did not deter CopyBeard and his quest for the crunch. It's not a secret that CopyBeard was a glutton. In fact, his mouth was a black hole and his stomach a bottomless pit. His favorite foods usually involved fast food, primarily McDonald's, as Sombra could recall the many occasions when she wanted to eat something healthy only for him to interject and throw a tantrum if she said no, which was nearly all the time. This large mass ate so much fast food, his bloodstream likely consists of grease and butter. I honestly feel my arteries clog at the thought of it. So, guess who follows Sombra back to her suite after work? That's right, CopyBeard! And Octavia, Sombra's roommate, was not the least bit happy to see him, or the fact that he could not take no for an answer. This mountain of perspiration had walled himself over to the kitchen and went for the first bag of chips he could get his hands on. Now, previously Sombra had been rationing a bag of Funyuns, but all her efforts went down the drain the moment he shoved his Vienna sausage-like appendages into the bag. But that's not all, as his eyes fell upon a bucket of cheese ball puffs which were supposed to last her a week. It is worth noting that CopyBeard has terrible hygiene. He rarely brushed his teeth or put on deodorant, never washed his hands. Hell, he may as well refuse to wipe for all I know. All I knew from that point was that those cheese balls were about to be defiled by his stench, and after popping the lid open and parking his semi-trunk-sized rear onto a seat, he stuck his ghastly palms into the container, taking a fistful and shoving them into his mouth. He loudly chewed as the cheese balls were mercilessly devoured, his hand pressed against his face to prevent any from escaping, and coating his fingers with the poisonous breath, sticking it back into the bucket to scoop up another handful before repeating the process all over again. Bad breath, unsanitary fingers, and cheese, added with the fact that it was contained within the bucket and further contaminating the cheese balls had survived his attack, made them inedible. The smell alone could be fatal, and after spending a week in the pantry, fermenting, and patiently awaiting its first victim, Sombra retrieved the bucket to have a snack. And dear reader, while I was not there to experience the level of utter horror and example of gluttony and pestilence, I could almost smell the container just by imagining it. The dreadful concoction had been unleashed and went back to Sombra's nostrils. It worked like an anesthetic as Sombra promptly passed out. She was only out for half an hour before Octavia discovered her and had gotten a good whiff of that cheese ball container. Despite Sombra's warning, luckily she did not pass out, but she spent a fair amount of time in the bathroom vomiting. To this day, Sombra has war flashbacks of the sight of cheese balls. Now, as I have said before, CopyBeard was bestowed the obnoxious trait of being oblivious to one's personal space and often pushes past the limit. Sombra is not an uptight person by any means. She just enjoys her personal space, and one of her biggest pet peeves was being touched without her permission. Yes, she loves hugs, but only if she accepts them. Sadly, this is something CopyBeard and his mother fail to understand. It is not rocket science. It is not hard to figure out if someone's uncomfortable or not, and yet they think it's a game to them. CopyBeard had this nasty habit of enveloping Sombra in his repulsive embrace or simply poking her to get a rise out of her. When he does get the reaction he wants, Sombra would fight back, i.e. yelling at him. He'll just come crying to Mommy because Sombra yelled at me. Yes, you're the one who flips out when someone calls you out on your behavior, but think it's okay to poke and prod someone who's clearly uncomfortable with interacting with you. Cry me a river. That's not at all the thing that's bothering her. The other mother would often reply with, "He's just messing around. What do you think, you're going to get cooties? Why do you have to be so uptight?" Now, CopyBeard were just a small child, then it will explain why he'd be such a gremlin. However, this is a grown man making his friend uncomfortable and blaming her for not wanting to play with him. The other mother is not any better, as instead of calling her name like any other normal person would, she found it hilarious to continuously pat Sombra's arm, often resulting in her recoiling in disgust. Then CopyBeard would try to stand so close to Sombra that not only could she smell the toilet breath and roadkill scented armpits, that he'd get behind her and place his meaty, clammy hands on her shoulders. To this day, Sombra still shudders at the thought. The worst of the bunch was Palethorn, as he is a basement dweller of the truest sense of the word. He spends about a majority of his day and night down there, staring blankly at his computer screen and getting pissed if someone were to interrupt him. Too bad for him, since Sombra and CopyBeard will go down there to play video games. The way he treats Sombra is horrifying, as he thoroughly convinced that she and CopyBeard would get married one day, and has pushed the idea on more than one occasion. He would make offhand sexist comments about Sombra's habits. Here, Sombra and I compiled a list of things he had said to her, including a pretty racist comment. "Oh, look, there's a guy on screen. Don't drool." "Sombra's working the corner again. How's the corner?" "Oh, Sombra's talking to her boyfriends." "Checking out the boys, Sombra?" "Indian people stink up the lab. It's not in their culture to shower at all." This one was directed to a friend of Sombra's who was East Indian. You see why Sombra refused to talk to CopyBeard and his parents, though if there is anything positive that came out of it, it's that Sombra came to be more confident in herself and quickly called people out if they are overstepping their boundaries.